every single time that our computer loads. If you've ever used Windows, this is similar to installing a program and then having that boot up on launch. It's kind of the same thing here. If we're installing something, we want that service to start on launch, we have to tell our machine to do that. So we're going to look at how to start a service and how to have a service start on launch. So the first service that we're going to look at is the Apache service. And this is what I used to use when I first started out as an ethical hacker. And the reason is that we can spin up our own web server fairly easily and host malicious data or files or things that we might want to access or might want somebody else to access. So before we run that command, I do want to do a proof of concept. So let's do an ifconfig, and we're going to grab our IP address here. I'm going to copy this, and then I want to open up Firefox. From within Firefox, I'm going to go ahead and try to navigate to that IP address. And you're going to see that it says it's unable to connect. This is exactly what we expected. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to say sudo service apache 2 start. We hit enter. It's going to ask for our sudo password. And then we have no confirmation of anything. So let's go ahead and come in back into the browser and we're going to refresh. And let's take away the HTTPS. And now you can see that this is here on port 80. So we are actually on HTTP, not HTTPS. And we have an Apache server running now. Now, let's say we wanted to stop this service. We can go in here and say sudo service apache 2 stop. And before we do that, I want to show you something. So if we come back into the Apache 2, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. You can see that our files are located in the var www html folder. And what that is, if we come to our home folder here, and we just go to file system, we scroll down and go to var, and then we go to www html. All I'm doing is going to the same location here. Why I'm doing this is where if I wanted to host like a picture or a file or malware, I could put that in here. This index.html is the same index page that's loaded here. Like if I open that, that's literally the same page that's being hosted. You're seeing it here from a file format, but now if I go back, you can see I'm hosting it at this IP address. So if I wanted to host something malicious, I could do that. Now, in order to stop the service, all we have to do is say stop, hit enter, then we come back and we refresh this page. You can see that we're now again unable to connect. Now, I did mention in the beginning of this video that this was my favorite way to host malicious stuff or just host files for whatever purpose. Now that has changed. I now use Python to do this. So we can create a file. Let's go ahead and just say echo hello, and we're going to do hello.txt. So if we ls, we can see that we've got a bunch of stuff in here, hello.txt being one of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin up a web server on the fly with Python. So I'm going to say python 3-m http.server, and then I'm going to give it port 80. Now, what we're saying is we want to run the module HTTP server, and we're going to run port 80 here. You can put whatever port you want. And you can see now it says, hey, it's hosting up HTTP on port 80. And what's going to happen is any file within the directory that I'm in is going to now be hosted. So you can see that I'm hosting all this stuff here. Pretty awesome. It's a quick way to host up a web server without having to start and stop services. And you can, on the fly from within a folder, just start a web server. So I think this is the cooler and better way to do it. So I wanted to show you how to start a service, but also that Python has some robust capabilities as well. If you follow into the Python section, we'll cover how to run an FTP server as well, which is also fun stuff. So I'm going to hit Control-C, which is going to, again, shut down this server. If I come here and refresh, you'll see that it's now shut down. And we can go ahead and talk about one more thing before we go. So let's say that we wanted a service to start when we started our machine. Well, for that, we're going to use the systemctl command, systemctl, and we can say enable If we wanted to, for example, enable SSH, we can come in here and just enable SSH, and we just hit enter on this. And now you can see that it's enabled. So when we restart the computer, SSH will always be enabled for us. Now I'm going to disable that. This isn't like security best practice. And now you can see that we have disabled it and we're good to go. So if you ever have a service that you want to run, you just need to figure out the name of the service and enable that. And there may be times that you want things to run. Like historically, I have ran SSH with it enabled, or I used to run the Apache 2 server, so I didn't have to spin it up every time. I just had a place to go immediately host that. But your mileage may vary depending on what it is you want to run, but knowing these commands is important in case you need to start or stop a service, maybe restart a service. Same thing with enabling a service at boot up or disabling a service at boot up. So that's it for this video. I'll go ahead and see you over in the next one. Now let's talk about installing and updating tools. So the first thing that we're going to do from our command line is we're going to look at how we would update our current machine. So just like other operating systems, Linux machines require updates as well, and patching can be best practice. So in order to update and upgrade our machine, we're going to use the sudo command, and we're going to say apt, and then we're going to say update and upgrade, just like that. So make sure you use 2 ampersand symbols here. We're going to do 2 commands. We're going to say, first, I want you to update. Second, I want you to upgrade. Well, why are we doing this? Why are we running 2 commands in the first place? Well, what we do when we actually install items on our Kali machine, we are going out to what are called repositories, and we're looking through packages. And the update command is going out to the known repositories, and it is updating those repositories. And then it's going to look at those repositories and say, okay, what needs upgraded here? So what tools have upgrades or updates available for them that we need? So if we run this command, you're going to see that it's going to go through these repositories. You can see it going through these Kali rolling and release, AMD 64 packages and contents, etc., etc. It'll take some time. As it goes through and it updates these repositories, it's going to find what programs we need, and it'll provide it in a list. Now, what you can see is it's asking us, are you root? So this is a lesson here. Sometimes we have to be the root user. We can't be just a sudo user to run the command. So what we're going to do in this instance is we're going to sudo switch user into root. Now we're root, and we're going to run that command again. We're going to say apt update and apt upgrade. Okay, and it's going to run through this, and then it should provide us with a list of what we're going to install, which if we scroll back up to the top, you can see that it says, hey, these packages were automatically installed and no longer required. And it says we can use the apt auto remove command to do that. It's saying here are the brand new packages that need to be installed. And then here are the packages that are going to be upgraded. So these are already installed, such as like Apache 2 has some updates that are required. And it's going to go through and install all of these. Now, when you scroll down to the bottom, it's going to say you need 801 megabytes, and yours might be different depending on when you watch this video. It's going to say, do you want to continue this operation? In this instance, I'm going to say no. And the reason that I'm going to say no is because updating on Kali Linux can break things. You should always have almost 2 copies of your Linux, right? You should take a backup copy before you ever make an update. And there are some limitations on being able to make backups, depending on if you're using VMware or VirtualBox, and we're not going to get into that right now, but just know that tools can easily get broken by pushing updates. And we'll talk about a tool that you can use that is up to date and kind of makes your Kali the latest and greatest without breaking anything. Even the current version of Kali right now, 2022.2, not all the tools work out of the box as the way that they should. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So let's say that you wanted to install a tool, and we're just going to go grab one as an example. So let's say that there was a tool you wanted to install, like this cron daemon common. I'm just going to copy that. You could come in here and you could say apt install cron daemon common, like this. Hit enter, and it's going to say, oh, you want to install this? Just hit yes, and it will install. And it will also upgrade this cron package here. I'm not going to do that, but just know that you can also install applications as a one-time thing if they're a part of the repository that you have. We're not going to get into updating repositories and adding manual repositories. We don't need to know that at this point in our Linux careers. We just need to understand that we're going out to a repository and we can download those items or packages based on what is in the repository. So updating the repository is always good, and then we check for upgrades available to our packages. In this instance, we're not going to do any updating or upgrading, but there may be a time where we need to install a specific tool, or we go out to the web and we have to grab a tool and it says, hey, run this apt install command. This is what it's going to be doing. This is how we would install something if we need to. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at the git command. And Git is a tool that runs with GitHub. I'm going to open up a new Firefox, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. We're going to go to GitHub. Actually, let's just go to Google. We're going to go to Google. And a lot of times in our ethical hacking careers, we're going to be searching for tools. We're going to come out here and we're going to say, oh, I really want to find a tool maybe that does brute force Office 365. And then I might say something like GitHub, and you can see it's already starting to fill out. And we might go find something like, okay, there's this Daft Hack tool. We might click on that. And we come in here and it might tell you how to install this. Well, this is PowerShell, so that's not a great example. We might come into here and we might say, okay, here's one how to install. So you go through and it'll say, here's the usage on how to use this. And sometimes they'll give you installation instructions, but a lot of times all you will need to do is you'll need to come in here and just download the code to install the file. So I'm going to show you a tool that we're going to install and run. We go to Google and we search for Pimp My Kali, just like that. You're going to see that we can click in here and this tool is available to us to download. Now, one way to look at a tool and see if it has any relevancy on GitHub is to look up at the number of stars that it has and the forks that it has. Anything with like 700 stars like this is pretty reputable, and you also should look at when it was last updated. You can see that this was last updated last month. Now, full disclosure, DeWalt actually works for TCM Security and is a fantastic person. If you never got to interact with DeWalt, he is somebody that is awesome and a great resource. He built this out because there were so many issues with Kali Linux, and the tools that were coming freshly installed, like in 2022.2, don't always work in the way that we intend them to work. So a lot of tools are broken, some things need downgraded, and there's a lot of options in here that can tell you, hey, here's what we can fix. Like we can fix different missing issues that are going on, or we can fix Golang or fix Impacket. And you don't have to worry about what any of that means right now until we get into pen testing. But this is something that we actually do install and run when we build out our lab machines, or we build out our machines for even hacking on clients. This is such a well done tool. And he tells you in here how to install it. He says, hey, git clone right here off of this address. We can also come up here and we can go to the code and we can just copy. We say copy Pimp My Kali right here. And then we'll come in and we can just say git clone. Actually, let's switch user. I'm sorry, let's switch user back to Kali. And we'll enter here. And then what I like to do when I install tools is I like to install them into the op folder, the OPT folder. So from here, we're going to run git clone, paste that. Actually, we're going to run sudo git clone. I apologize. And then enter your password. And now, if we look in here, we should have Pimp My Kali, which we do. So if we cd to Pimp My Kali, and now we ls, we can see that we have the pimpmykali.sh script. If you come back into the website, it will tell you how to run and operate this. Any decent GitHub will say, hey, here's how you run this script. So it says, hey, you just run sudo pimpmykali. This is for a new Kali VM. You just need to run menu option N. We're going to copy this and paste it, and then we're going to run it. So now this tells you, what do you want to do? Well, here's all the different options. N is a new VM setup. Run this option as your first time running Pimp My Kali. Okay, so that's going to fix all the things for you. I'm going to go ahead and hit N and let this run. It's going to go out and fetch some stuff from repositories, and it's running apt update. And now it's going to install certain tools and packages and uninstall certain tools and packages. As you can see, it's rolling through here. So go ahead and let this run. I'm going to pause the video here for a second and then meet me back when you're at the next screen where you can actually enter in any sort of command. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes and we get to this page here. And you can see that it's asking us if we want to run root login installation. It explains that in Kali 2019.x, the default user used to be root, which we talked about early on in this course. And now that they've switched it to Kali, which is what we've been using. Now, do we want to re-enable the ability to log in as root in Kali? In this instance, I'm going to choose yes. However, you need to make sure that you are comfortable and capable of running as root in Linux. If you do not feel comfortable, stick with running as Kali. You're going to see me throughout the course as we get into the ethical hacking section running as root. Just know that there may be times where you might need to use sudo, or you may need to switch user into root, as you saw me do with upgrading packages just a few minutes ago, that may be required. So if you're understanding of that, you can hit no on this screen, and that's perfectly okay. Security best practice suggests to hit no. I'm going to hit yes because I feel comfortable running as root. I'm the only user on this machine, and I don't have any accountability or repudiation to worry about. So I'm going to give a new password for this. And I'm going to enter it again. And now it's going to ask if we want to copy everything over from our Kali folder into our root folder. I'm going to say no. And now it's going to continue on installing. So we're going to let this run again. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to, and then we'll meet you back when this is all said and done. Okay, and when everything is said and done, which it took about 10 minutes to get through all of that, you should get to this all done happy hacking screen right here, and everything should be installed for you. If you chose to go the root route, that's a weird thing to say, if you chose to go the root route, you can log out and log back in as root and begin using Linux as root. Otherwise, you can continue on with this lesson using Kali as your main user. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next video. Last video in the section, and this is going to be one of my favorites. So what we're going to be talking about is scripting with Bash. I'm going to show you some cool tricks that we can do to kind of narrow down some of the results that we get, and then I'm going to show you how you can automate some of that process, and we'll take that and even write out some for loops and one-line loops, which this might not make any sense right now, and that's absolutely okay, but by the time the video is done, hopefully it does. So the first thing I want to show you is I want to show you how we're going to write a ping sweep. So we're going to write a ping sweeper. Basically, we're going to go out and say, I want to ping a device. If that device is alive, go ahead and show me that result. And we're going to sweep an entire network. So what we're going to do first is we're going to identify a device that's alive so we can test this out and then build upon that. So you can go ahead and type in ifconfig and then just hit enter. Now my Ethernet here is on a NATed network. So I'm running through a different IP address subnet here. So this one is 192.168.57.150. My actual IP address is on a .4.x here. So I'm going to, for this example, I'm going to be pinging 192.168.4.29. However, and you can see here's the ping that we're getting back. However, if you are unsure of a IP address in your house that is active or your subnet in your house, that's okay. You can just run 57.1 for this example. You might not get a lot of return results. However, you might only get 1 or 2 when we do this sweep. So I advise you to figure out what your IP address is. That's a good challenge anyway. And if you are familiar with networking, which you should be at this point, then you should be able to determine the IP address of your home network. But if you do not do that, then you can use 57.1 or whatever your IP address is here on this third octet. So that will also work if you see that. All right, so I'm going to clear this. Now, what are we noticing when we're pinging? We're pinging this address and we're getting some data back. Now, if we ping an active address, you can see that we get, okay, 64 bytes from 192.168.4.29. It's saying it's active. We're getting details back. If we were to ping something, let me do like 41, where we just don't get any data back. Okay, and let's try this one more time. Let's try this a different way. Let's do like a count of 1. -C of 1 will do a count of 1. It's going to try to send one packet over and see if it works. Nothing's happening, right? It's trying to transmit that packet. You could see that it's getting 0 received here, where here's getting 4 received. No data is coming back. It's just not doing anything for us. So the thing that we can identify here is, what's the big difference? If we look at line 1 and 2 versus line 1 and 2, what are we seeing when we get data back? Well, the big difference here is well, two of them, I guess. We see that we get this response, right? That's a big difference. And then down here, it'll say, hey, we received some packets if it's not 0. Now, the easy way to do this is to look at a line that says, hey, we received data, which is this line here, okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to narrow this down just a little bit. What we're going to say is we're just going to do a ping of 1 time. So I'm going to clear this. I'm going to bring it back to this like this. I'm going to do a count of 1. And that should just ping once. And that's perfect. We don't need to ping endlessly. We just want to make sure we can ping once and then we're done. Okay, and then from here, I'm going to put this into a text file. I'm just going to call this ip.txt, just like that. So when I cat out ip.txt, now you can see that I have this file. It's stored. I don't have to run the command again. We're good to go. So what we're going to do now is we can take this and then we can start gathering data based off of what we see here. So what I want to do is I want to just extract this one line here, the 64 bytes from 192.168.4.29. And the best way to do that is with a command called grep. So grep is going to look for a specific term or phrase, and we can do that, and it's going to pull down any line that has that term or phrase. So if I say grep here, and then I just put in quotation 64 bytes, like this, now when I cat out this, all I'm pulling down is this line, and it's even highlighting it for us. It's saying, here's the line that we see, 64 bytes from 192.168. Okay, so we've extracted just the one line. And why am I extracting this line? Well, if we're building out a ping sweeper, what I want to do is I want to sweep every single IP within a specific subnet. So say this .4, right? I want to ping 4.1.2.3 all the way through 254, 255. I want to see if I can get through all the IP addresses in a subnet. So what we're going to do is we're going to ping every single one of them and say, hey, are you up? Are you there? And we're going to do it with a count of 1. And we're going to say, are you there? Okay. And if they're there, they're going to say, yeah, I'm here. 64 bytes. Here's my response. And it's going to say 64 bytes from this IP address. So we want to extract the IP addresses to say, yeah, we're alive. That's basically our goal here. So when we run this on a bigger scale, which is what we're going to do, we're going to need to grep out this information and extract this information to where we only just get the IP address back. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start narrowing down and grabbing this IP address, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to take this all in one instance and run it and then extract IP addresses. So from here, what I want to do is I want to do another command. So every time we pipe, we're saying, hey, run this command, then with that command, run this command, then also run this command too. So we're going to keep running this command on top of this to narrow things down. So here's what we're doing here. We're going to run a command called cut. And with cut, we're going to say, I want to cut something out of this. We need to provide it what is called a delimiter. So we do a -D like this. And the delimiter I'm going to use is a space. And then I'm going to say -F for field, and then I'm going to say 4. Okay, what is this doing? Well, it's saying, hey, I want to cut this line that you're getting back on a space. So the delimiter is a space. So here's a space, here's a space, here's a space. And it says, I want to count up to 4 to grab that data. So 1, 2, 3, 4 right here. So if we say 4 here, like this, we hit enter,
we're grabbing that specific IP address because we're doing it by spaces. If we did it on 3, what do you think we're going to grab? We're going to grab the word from. So you can see here's from. So what I want to do is grab the IP. So we're going to use this cut just like this, use our delimiter, and then get to the correct field position that we want to grab the IP address. All right, so we've got the IP address. Now there's only one thing wrong here with this IP address, is that there is a little colon on the end of it. We just want this without a colon at all. We want it just like this. Now there's a couple ways we can do this. We could use something called sed. Sed's a little bit complicated and a little bit advanced, I would say, for where we're at right now. So I'd rather teach you an easier way to do this, and that is called translate. So with translate, all we're gonna do is we're going to do one more pipe like this, and we're just gonna say TR for translate, a -D for a delimiter again, and then we're gonna say we wanna get rid of this. And that's it, we're just getting rid of this. Okay, so if we run this one more time, now you can see that we've successfully extracted this IP address out. That's our goal, that's all we wanted to do. Now, how can we apply this to something bigger? How can we make this part of a bigger script? That is the question, and we're gonna do that. So what I want you to do is I just want you to copy this, okay? Copy this entire line, and we're going to go into a mouse pad. So let's copy the selection, and I'm gonna clear my screen. I'm just gonna say mouse pad, and we're gonna call this ipsweep.sh. Okay, so this is going to be a bash script, and I'm gonna make this bigger. And the first thing we're gonna do with our bash script is we have to declare that it's a bash script. We're gonna say hash bang right here, or shebang is what we'd call this, /bin/bash. This allows the machine to know when we run this, allows bash to know, hey, we're calling this, here's the location of bash, this is what we're running with the script. You're also gonna see this when we use Python as well. You'll see the declaration here at the top, or when we're calling this out. So I'm gonna go ahead and Control S and save this. That'll add some nice color to this, so when we're coding this out, we get to see in color. I like that a lot. I'm gonna actually make this a little bit smaller and then make this like this here so we can get the whole picture. Okay, so what I wanna do is I wanna paste in what we just wrote. So I'm just gonna Control V here and paste that in. So we don't need to do a cat of an IP address here. In this instance, instead, we're gonna change this back. We're gonna ping. Remember, we wanna ping every device in the network. So we want to ping, say if we're pinging 192.168.4.x, okay, we wanna ping that. And we can leave this like this for now. Don't worry about changing anything here. This is just gonna be a placeholder. We're gonna do a little bit of extra syntax here to make this work. So we're going to write what is called a for loop. So we're going to say for, and I'll explain what this does here in a second. You're also gonna see this again when we get into Python and coding. And so you'll be able to understand more and more about loops and what for loops are, while loops, etc. They're very, very useful and very common in coding and scripting. So I'm gonna say for IP in, and then I'm gonna say sequence 1 through 254. Now, very important, this character here is not an apostrophe, okay? This is not an apostrophe. This is the little line, I don't know what it's called. It's above the tilde next to your escape button on your keyboard. So it's this right here, okay? It's like a backwards apostrophe almost. I'm sure there's a term for it, I just don't know it. So you come in here and you say, okay, for IP address in sequence 1 through 254. And I'm gonna explain what all this does in a second. I want you just to type this out for now. I want you to say do, all right? And then I want you to come down here and we're going to say ampersand on this line and we're gonna say done. I'm gonna explain what all this means. Okay, so this is a loop that we've just created. What we're saying is for the IP address, and we're just declaring this could be Bob if you wanted to. I'm just making it a name or a term that's easy for us to remember. So we're gonna say for IP, but if you wanna call this Bob, call it Bob. For IP in sequence 1 through 254. So what sequence is doing is it's saying, hey, I want to count everything from 1 to 254. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 254. This for loop means I'm going to do this every single time. So for IP in 1, for IP in 2, for IP in 3, we're going to run this command until we're done. So until this sequence has run 255 times, It's done. Okay, and now we're gonna say, I wanna do a count of $IP. So what we're saying here is for IP in sequence 1 through 254, go ahead and do a ping -C for a count of 1, 192.168.4, 254. And here we're gonna say .1, .2, .3. Every time this loops over and over and over, it's going to be incrementing that number through this sequence. That's all we're doing. This is a basic loop, okay? So we're gonna keep going through and through and through. Now, this will work. If you plugged in your hard-coded IP address here, this will absolutely work. Now, we can improve this just a little bit if we want to. So what's going on here is what we're gonna say is, if we wanted to run this, we would just do ./ and then IP sweep, okay? And this would work, that's fine. But we can make this a little bit better from a coding perspective. We can come in here and we can give this a $1, and that means argument 1. So what we're saying here is I want to give an argument instead. So if you want to be technical, this first ./IP sweep.sh, that is argument 0. So you can consider this $0. Argument 1 would be what you type after that. So this would be argument 1, argument 2, etc. So in this case, what we can do is we could say, I want to run 192.168.4 like this, and this will run the .1, .2, .3 after it. So you provide the argument, it places that here in argument 1, and then it does the rest for you. So this way you can specify your network, and if you wanted to ping multiple networks, you don't have to come back in here and keep changing this. It just works. So super easy. This is a great little script for a /24 type subnet, okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and try running this really quick. I'm gonna just Control S, save this. I'm gonna close it. We're gonna do a chmod +X on IP sweep. If it'll allow us to, we might have to do a, okay, let's do LSLA real quick, make sure it worked. It sure did. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We're going to run the IP sweep, and we're going to say 192.168. You just put in your IP here, and I'm gonna run that. All right. And you could see all the devices that are coming back within my network here. I'm gonna go ahead and hit Control C, cancel this out. And so this is grabbing all the different devices in my network. Now that's great. That works out really well. But what we can do is improve this. What if I typed in a, what if I didn't type anything at all? What if I just hit enter here? Now I'm just getting all kinds of pings unknown, and it's going off of some of the stuff I was doing before, but it just causes all kinds of issues and errors, right? So you can see I'm trying to hit Control C, it's taking its time to break. Here we get issues because we're just allowing any sort of argument here. What we need to do is we need to fix this up just a little bit. So what we can say is we can come back in here and just go mousepad ipsweep.sh and come in here and let's add a little bit extra. Oh, and I also left this in here. Don't leave this in here. That's why that was running twice. Okay, so what we're doing here is we need to add in a statement. What we're going to do is we're going to add in a if statement. If statements are conditions. We're saying, hey, if this condition is met, do something for us. If it's not met, then go ahead and do something else. All right. So we're going to say if, and we're going to just put in here $1 is equal to nothing, then we're going to go ahead and just say then echo you forgot an IP address. Echo syntax, something like this. We'll just say IP sweep.sh and we'll go 192.168.4 like that. Okay. And then if we did do this correctly, if we do have an argument inside of argument 1, then we're going to say else, do all of this here and be done. And then we're going to end our if statement with fi. Now, this script, or this resemblance of this script, is not one of my own, by the way. This goes credit to something I've modified over time, but the original credit definitely goes to Georgia Weidman. I remember seeing this in her course a long, long time ago when I was first getting started, and she did a great job of teaching this. This is just a modification of this script. So I just want to make sure that all credit goes to her. But looking at this, let's break this down really quick before we run this again. We've got an if statement. We said if argument 1 doesn't equal anything, then you're going to echo back out and say, hey, you forgot an IP address. Here's the syntax. If it does include something, then we're going to go ahead and come in here and say, let's run our for statement, our for loop, and run through it. And then we're going to end our if here. The only thing that I'm doing uniquely here is I'm including this ampersand, which is going to run this command multiple times at once. This is a good way to explain it. Basically, we have a couple ways of doing this. We could say like this. We could put a command here, and this will run one at a time. It'll say, okay, for 1, for 2, for 3. This allows multiple instances of this loop to run at once and just speeds things up. I could show you the difference between that. So I'm going to go ahead and just Control S, save this. I'm going to go ahead and just run this script real quick. Now let's try running it without anything here. Okay, now look, it says you forgot an IP address. So look, we did that correctly. Now let's go ahead and add the 192.168.4, run it. And you can see, okay, it's sweeping, but it's taking its sweet time. Especially for the IP addresses that are going to hang, like if I don't have a .2 or .3, it's going to take a while. So I'm going to Control C and get out of this if it'll let me. And it looks like it's actually going to hang. So what we can do is we can come back in. I'm going to open a new tab real quick just while that's waiting. And I'm just going to say mousepad, and we're just going to go back into ipsweep.sh. It's in this folder. There we go. Okay. So from here, I'm going to change this back to the ampersand, and I'm going to save it. I just want you to see the difference really quick and why I run it like this. So ipsweep.sh 192.168.4. You can see it's picking everything up really fast. All right. What I can do now is I can run this and then store this into like ips.txt, something like that. Just like found IP addresses. Okay, so now if I cat ips.txt, I have all the IP addresses I just found, and I found them that fast versus this, which may still be going, and it is, and I can't even kill it. I'm just gonna close this out. Okay, so this is the big difference there with that ampersand and the speed of what it is capable of doing. So with all that being said, we could take this and do one more thing. So I want to show you how we can utilize a one-liner. These are called one-line statements in Bash, and we can do similar to what we just did and accomplish that in this command line. So now we have an IP address. We have a list of IP addresses. Let's say that we want to run Nmap. Now we haven't gotten to Nmap yet. You don't need to really know about it. Just know that it is a tool that allows us to go out and do port scanning. Okay, so typically we would just say something like Nmap, and we might do something like -T4-A-P- like this. This is just saying, I want to run Nmap scan, I want to look at everything, and I want to scan all ports. This is just an example. You can just run Nmap IP address like this, and that would be fine too. Like we could just go 192.168.4.29, and we'll do a quick Nmap scan. Okay, but what we can't do here is we can't just say, hey, I want to run, well, we could say, I want to run Nmap for everything in .0/24. The issue is it's going to take time looking and finding what IP addresses are valid here. If we have a list, we can automate this process quite a bit. We can just come in here and we can say something a little bit different. We can say, hey, for IP, we're using the same kind of syntax, in $, and we're going to put parentheses here. We're going to say cat, and then we're going to say ips.txt, and then we're just going to do this. We're going to say do nmap $IP, and then again we have the option of doing done, or we can do ampersand done, just like this. Okay, I'm just going to do done here as an example and just show you. So this is really easy. We're saying, hey, for every IP address in this list, and all we're doing is we're catting out this IP list that we just had. So it's going to take the first IP, then run the Nmap scan, and it's going to come back and run the next one. So until this list is completely done, it's going to keep going through this loop. That's all it is, a simple loop. And then we're going to say done. It's going to take that IP address. It's going to start scanning it. It's going to go through and hopefully find information and go in a loop. So this is a quick way to automate some of this process. I actually do this with a lot of my scripts where I will do some probing, see if anything is out there that's alive, put it into an IP file, and you're going to see this later in the course, and then Nmap scan that. So think about this. Hopefully this gets your wheels spinning on what you can do to really start scripting some of this stuff out. And this is going to be the first time you get your hands dirty with scripting. We're going to go on again with this, and we're going to get more advanced as we go. But this should be a good introductory lesson to you on how we can build a simple tool and automate a lot of this process fairly easily with just a little bit of command line syntax. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next section, and I will see you over there.
Welcome to this module on Python. So if you've never used Python before or even heard of Python before, Python is a coding and scripting language. It is commonly used in ethical hacking, and it's commonly used all around the world. It is actually considered one of the best beginner languages to start with if you've never learned coding before. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to cover some of the basics of Python. So we'll cover everything you see on this screen here: strings, math, functions. We're going to get into conditional statements and looping. We'll get into some more advanced items, and eventually we're going to build our own tools. So we're going to be building a port scanner at the end of the lesson. And then when we get into the exploit development section of this course, we're going to use Python again to write our own exploits. So it's going to be used throughout the course. You're going to see it again as a ethical hacker as well. You're going to go onto websites and you might need to download Python code or something to utilize against a host or a client, and it's just going to be frequently seen for you. So very important topic to cover, especially for the foundations. One very big thing to point out: you do not have to be a developer to be successful in penetration testing. The important thing is that you understand what you're seeing and understand how to read code. If when you come away from this module, you have a better understanding on how to read what you are seeing in code, you'll be much better off. By no means do you have to be a developer. I am still to this day nowhere near a developer level, and I'm very, very successful in what I do. You don't have to be a developer. So the big takeaway here is to take very good notes, understand what you're seeing. If you need to watch a video multiple times in this section, absolutely okay. Just make sure you understand everything in front of you and understand that the lessons are going to build upon each other, and it should all come together in the end. And you're going to get to see it over and over through the course, especially in the exploit development section where we write our own Python script. So I look forward to teaching you this module on Python, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.
Okay, on to our first lesson. The first thing that we're going to cover is going to be strings. And in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and make a directory on my Linux machine. You can make a folder in your Mac or your Windows machine if you're using those operating systems. I'm just going to go in here and just say make dir Python, and then I'm going to go ahead and go into that directory. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and make my first script. So I'm going to clear my screen with Control L, and I'm going to say mousepad, and I'm just going to call this script first.py. And I'm going to give it the ampersand here at the end. That's just going to allow me to open up this process of mousepad and also have the terminal available to me when I need it. So you'll see why I do that here in a little bit. Now, if you're not on Linux, that's okay. You can use something like Notepad++ or CodeRunner for Mac, which we showed earlier in this course. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and enter in a shebang, which is a hash and an exclamation /bin /python3. And this is important for Linux here because we are calling out the directory. If you're familiar with Linux, what's happening here is we have two options. We can come in here and we can say Python3, and we can say first.py, and that'll execute our script. Or in theory, we can come in here, we can just do a /first.py and run it that way. if we run it like this, our script will not know where to go unless we declare that. So up here, we're giving the shebang /bin/python3. That is where Python 3 is located in this machine. So it will come up here and it will look for this first and say, okay, I'm going to execute this based on Python 3. So that is a little bit of a Linux nuance here and something you should know in case you are ever coding in Linux or an environment that is similar like Unix, which Macs do run off of. So from here, if you've ever taken a coding class, the first thing you do in every single coding class is what is known as hello world. So we're going to print out hello world and print it to our terminal. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and do something like this. We're going to say print, and then we'll do a parentheses and we'll say hello world. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And if we run this, and I'm going to run this with Python 3, if we run this, Python 3 first.py, you'll see that it says hello world. Now, one thing that we can do in here is good practice for being a developer is add some notes in. So we're going to add a comment in here. We're going to do a hashtag or a pound symbol, and we're just going to say print string. Now, when we run this again, this isn't going to print out. Comments are just for us inside of the script, and I can prove that to you by saving this and running it again. You'll see all we have in here is hello world. Perfect. So comments with a hash are just meant for whoever is reading your script or your code. And that could be you, or bad scenario, but what if you get hit by a bus tomorrow? You're the main developer and nobody knows how to read your code because you didn't leave any comments. That'd be very bad. So good coding practice suggests to leave good comments and make sure that people can come in and read your code and understand what is going on in here. So we're going to add comments along the way so that way we understand what we're doing and practice good habits as well. So what you're seeing here is what's called a string. You're seeing a string in quotations. And you can see a string printed out with single quotes as well. So we can just do hello world. I'll add the exclamation for consistency. And if we save this and print this, you'll see that it also prints hello world. So it really doesn't matter if you have single quotes or double quotes until we get into more advanced strings, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on in the course. But for now, just know that you can use single quotes or double quotes when printing out a string. Another thing that we can do with strings is print on multiple lines. So if we say print and we do triple quotes like this, we say this string runs, and then we hit enter, multiple lines with an exclamation, and add in 3 more double quotes there and close this off. We can add a note here as well that says triple quote for multi-line. And if we save this with Control S and we run this again, you're going to see this string runs multiple lines. Awesome. Another thing that we can do is concatenate strings. So we can print out something like this string is, and now we're going to add a space at the end of it. Make sure you have a space right here. We're going to do a plus sign, and then we're going to say awesome. Just like that. And we can say we can also concatenate. It's always hard for me to spell that. So what's going to happen here is it's going to take this string plus this string when it prints out. So the reason we have a space is it's got to have the space because there's no space here, and this won't just add a space for us, even though in our heads we might want it to. So we're going to go ahead and save this, print it out one more time, and you can see that it concatenated and said this string is awesome. Now, one last thing. We can also print out a new line. So we can just do something like this. And we can use a single quote this time just to do a proof of concept. Do a \n like this. And this will print out a new line. And we'll get familiar with that later on. As we get into functions, we'll write our own function to make a new line. But for now, if we wanted to add another line, we could, and then we can just print test that new line out. And let's see if it actually gave us a line printed in between this concatenation and this new print statement here. Let's go ahead and save that. Print it. And you can see there is a line here. So the \n will print out a new line for us. And that is all we need to know for basic string. So we're going to go ahead and move on to math. You can go ahead and leave this open. We're going to run through this as we go, and then you'll have a long script, which will also make for very good notes. Let's go ahead and move on to math. So math. Python actually has a built-in math interpreter. So we can do a bunch of fun stuff with Python and with math that's automatically built in. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this section math. And if you want to keep track of sections, you can come up here and just call this strings and just capitalize it like that. And then that way we kind of have an idea of where we're at. You can even add an extra line here if we want to. So from here, let's go ahead and play around with math just a little bit. So if I wanted to do a print of 50 plus 50, we can definitely add. We can also subtract. So if you want to do 50 minus 50, you could do that. And I'll give you some time to catch up here in just a second. I'm just going to do a few print statements, then we'll take a look at them, and then we'll move on to some more math as well. We can also do 50 times 50. And we'll just use the little star or the asterisk. We'll just say multiply. And we'll also do 50 divided by 50. We'll just say divide. So if we save that, you could take a second to catch up. You could see we are just doing simple math here. We should expect 100. We should expect 0. We should expect 1 here and 2,500 if my mental math is correct. So I'm going to go ahead and print this out. Okay, and we've got 100, 0, 2,500, and 1.0. So this 1.0 is a little bit different. This is what's known as a float. Everything else that has come out so far is just an integer. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a few minutes, but know that integers are on the left-hand side. And if we don't have a decimal point here, we're looking at integers. And on the right-hand side, when we see anything on the right-hand side of the decimal, we're looking at what is called a float. And that becomes very important depending on when we need it. For now, we're going to keep worrying about math. We'll get into integers and floats in just a little bit. So another thing that math built into Python can do is it can do PEMDAS. If you've never heard of PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. You may have had it something different within your educational experience, but it will do that for you. So if you do 50 plus 50 minus 50 times 50 divided by 50, it will give you the answer. I don't know that mental math offhand. Another thing that we can do are exponents. So we can print, say, 50 to the second power, which is the same thing as 50 times 50, which would be 2,500 as well. And we can get exponents out of this. And we'll actually go ahead and save this and run this here because the next stuff I want to be able to lay out clearly. So you can see that we have successfully done the math here. It did it for us. Awesome. And it also did the exponent for us as well. So now a couple of weird things with division. So you saw the 1.0 before. Well, we have a few things that we can do. For example, the 50 divided by 6, but using a percentage sign is what's called a modulo. And that it just takes what is left over. So 50 divided by 6 is not divisible. There is a leftover. So if we print that, you'll see we get a leftover of 2, which makes sense because 6 goes into 50 8 times. 6 times 8 is 48. And then we have 2 left over. So if we want to know what the remainder is, we can use a percentage sign here. We can also do something like 50 divided by 6, like we saw earlier. And this will have division with remainder. So we can say or float. We'll save that and take a look at that really quick. You can see we get 8.3, and then it rounds up eventually to a 4. And lastly, what if we wanted no remainder? So if we just did 50 divided by 6, we say no remainder. We could do this, and we should get 8 here. So depending on the situation and what we want, we might want a situation where we only want the integer, or we only might want what's left over, or perhaps we actually want the full number of what's being divided. So there are a few different ways to divide with math in Python, and it's good to know all of them depending on the situation that you run into. So for now, just take notes on this and know that there are a few ways to do math and division, and you can do PEMDAS and exponents and all kinds of fun stuff, and this is just scratching the surface of math with Python. So that's it for this lesson. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next one, which is going to start covering variables and methods. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to call this section variables and methods. And if we want to make our script a little bit clean, we can just come in here and copy this new line. It'll be a lot easier once we write a function for this, but we haven't gotten there quite yet. So we're going to print out this new line, and that way when we print this out, you can see that we have kind of gaps in between the sections that we're working on. So now we're going to work on variables and methods. So variables. Variable means something can vary. It can change, and we're going to look at that here in a second. So if we have something like quote, and we make quote equal to all is fair in love and war. And this is what? This is a string. We are storing this string inside of this variable called quote. And we can just come in here now and we can print out quote. And if we do that, we should get this returned back to us. You can see all is fair in love and war. If we didn't print this, just go ahead. Actually, we'll just comment this out. This is a great way to test the script. If we just save this now with a comment and we hit enter, there's nothing here. We haven't given it any instructions to actually print out. So now we can print this out, and it's printing whatever is stored inside of that variable. In this instance, we have a string stored in there. Now, when we talk about methods, methods are just functions that are available for a given object. Now, you could think of functions as something built into Python that allows us to do something. And it'll make sense here when we get into using methods. So we have this quote, all is fair in love and war. Well, what if we wanted to print this in a few different ways? Well, we can use methods to do that. For example, we can print quote in uppercase. Just do upper like that. And this is going to make it all uppercase because we're giving it this period, upper, and then open close parentheses right here. And that is allowing us to use that method. So we can say uppercase. And we can also print in lowercase if we do lower. And just for one more, we can also do print, and we'll say quote.title. And this is what's known as title case. And title case will capitalize every single letter like it is the title. In this instance, here we're going to get like the A capitalized, which wouldn't really be true in a title, but still just know that title case is meant to capitalize every first letter within your string or your sentence in this case. We're going to call this lowercase here. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this, and we're going to print this out. And you can see the differences that we have. We have it here in its normal quote, and then we have it in uppercase, all lowercase, and then